sound of guitar. So you've got to guess what kind of guitar this is before I set the video live. In 3, 2, 1. Could you tell? It's the PRS Silver Sky. Oh, there's the camera. I've got 15 million things to look at. Welcome to VCQ. Mick here. No Dan this week. He's milking camels. Again. In Egypt this time. Looks like the voices might be a bit hot again. Anyway, welcome everyone to VCQ. Hopefully you can see and hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. Check this out. I've got a foot switch. Look at that. Madness. Madness. BV's texting me. Good. Can you let me know you can see and hear me, please, BV? Because we never quite know, do we? We never quite know. Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. As I said, no Dan this week. He's here in effigy, in spirit, in voodoo doll form. So let's see if it'll let me log in then. Because it so often doesn't. How have you been? Happy Monday. Oh, this isn't going to work, is it? Watch this die now. What did we do on Friday? One overdrive pedal. Thanks for all your comments. It struck a chord with a lot of people. Thanks, BV. Thanks for letting me know. Struck a chord with a lot of people. One overdrive pedal is all you need. And then obviously, because it's that pedal show, we ended up with 2 overdrive pedals and a volume pedal. Just to say that that might be a better way to do it. And we had loads of love, particularly for the Boss SD1 Wazza, which many of you really seem to love a great deal. And loads of people saying, yeah, you ninnies, I've been using a volume pedal after my overdrive pedal for years. What's wrong with you? Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm just going to log in and see who's on tonight. I suspect we shall see some familiar names. If I can work out how to do that. I can. Who have we got on tonight then? Daniel Mincher is on. Brian Carpenter is on. I have such sights to shot. I can only see that far. Shoot. Chris Little is on. Hey Chris, and Seth Rowe and Brandon Whiteley. Michael Schneider is on, and Daniel Thornton and Binky and Johnny T and Iron Wolf 1776. Winston Bowman is on, and Eric Zenhausen is on. Joshua Schwartz, Ruff Freitas, good to hear from you, buddy. Been a while. Jason Sears, PG Nash, Andrew R, G Viceroy, Tim States. Of all the states to be, Tim is a good one, I would say. Scent of a wheelchair pillow. How are you, man? We met you on Friday, came to an experience day. We had a wonderful day on Friday. Big Riffs and Rigs. Jean Mirapica is on. MF Chicken Flipper. All right. And Wastel 10, non-aligned. Geese van Ender Osmorite. I woke up thinking about you this morning, Geese. It's really weird. I woke up, I was like, I wonder how you do actually say Esmorite. And if, I say this every week, please let me know how to say it properly. But it's nice to hear from you, Geese. And Morley Robertson and Swizz871 and Dave Sandman. Yeah. Broken Oars Podcast. AJ, good to hear from you, bud. Loads of lovely friends. Michael Giliberto, Michael Box, Scott Curry, and I'm sure many more when I finally log into the screen that I actually should be looking at. Yes, Dan isn't sick this week. He is genuinely working with wildlife. Somewhere in the world. Dead air. I tell you what we need to get next, right, is sound effects. So we can just go boop, 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 or something like that. That would work. Because I have to do 2 things at once. What do you think, Dan? That's not a knife. Oh, God. Anyone know the password to our YouTube channel? Because I've forgotten it. John Mayer, Doyle Bramall, Let's try that. This is BV getting in touch. Okay, 20 super chats. I may want to switch off. I will do that post haste. Oh, 24. Oh god, I better switch them off right now. Okay, so if you've super chatted to this point, I will answer. But I've just turned them off, okay? The sound of gentle coughing you can hear in the background is Dan. Not that Dan, a different Dan. Dan who's joined us on Work Experience today. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
There you go. And my computer is frozen. Joining us on Work Experience today to help out and do some things. Lucky Dan, isn't he? Good. Right, super chats, turn them off. There we go. Turn off. Hooray. Okay, Cassius Ray, you're last in with the super chat today. And Chris Egg, you're also in, so we'll get to those presently. You don't seem to want to do anything. How we been then? What's going on? Don't really want to talk about Fender, but kind of interesting, isn't it? How that's unfolding. What else is happening? Tell me what's happening in your world, if I can ever get to the video. Here we go. Nice bit of dead air there. Have you ever worked in broadcasting? Dead air, not really allowed. Music therapy, Laz. Hello, mate. Tim Richardson. Chris Egg and Todd Roy. How are you, Todd? Always good to hear from you, buddy. Daniel Mincher is on. Traversy. In fact, Traversy says, what's your opinion on a Collings i35 guitar? Thanks. I think Collings make the best production electric guitars in the world. I'm just going to say that out flat. Marvellous things. What I like about what Collings has done with the i35 is to make it quite different from the Gibson ES335. Not least it's an inch smaller across the big bout, this one here, 15, not 16 inches. Some slightly different elements of construction, and if you've ever played a Collings guitar, you will know that they are made to an exquisite level, I would say. So I think lots of things about the Collings i35. Why don't I play one? I want 16, not 15. I had this conversation with Collings, not that they would give a shit, but I don't mean they don't give a shit. I mean, not that they would worry too much about what I think. But anyway, I want the full 335 width. And I don't know, I'm old-fashioned, aren't I? I kind of like the original thing. I do have other Collings guitars. Anyway, yeah, so that's what I think about that. Evening, Ian Bogle. Good to hear from you, buddy. And Kristen Abbott is on. And Angus McLennan wants to know, is Dan working with a band that has an animal name? Let's have your bands with animal names then, shall we, in the chat? I'll start you off with Rat. Good. Oh yeah, Gibson CEO change, says Jeff Motter. Yeah, right, so Cesar has stepped along. He hasn't stepped down so much, he's stepped along. And there's a new CEO, who I believe is a lady, is that right? Is a woman? Have I got that right? Or she's standing in until they find somebody? What's the radius of Dan's red telly neck? Says Angus Barry. It's 7 1/4, Angus. Straight vintage spec. What can happen with fret jobs over the years is the more times it's refretted, and red has been refretted a number of times now, you can end up flattening them out a bit. I've seen that happen on quite a few guitars, but Dan's is still a solid, well, closer to 7 1/4 than it is 9 1/2. Yeah. Good. All right. Scorpions. Yep. Nice. Evan Ward. Scorpions for animals. The dinosaurs, says David Tompkins. The monkeys, says Todd Roy. Keep them coming in. Let's stampede to the super chats then. By the way, the bar is coming along. Shwangri Bar, the 13th bar. Git bar, whatever you want to call it. The production stuff is now all in. And very cool it is too. I'll do a tour of it at some point. All the studio stuff is now plumbed in and it works great. We're really pleased with it. It's, yeah, tweaking week by week, as we always do, slowly getting it deadened down a bit more in here in terms of sound. Dan was helping me do that today. Thank you, Dan. Not Dan, by the way, for late joiners. Late joiners, Dan is not here. He's working with animals somewhere. Yeah, right. Super Chai. Thank you for all the super chats, everyone. We really appreciate it. Helps us keep doing what we're doing. And first in this week will be Andrew R. Thank you very much for your super chat, Andrew. Andrew says, evening, Titans of Tone. Small in stature, Titanic in sinking ability? No, Andrew R. Evening, Titans of Tone. When is the last time you tried out a new to you piece of gear and immediately became part of your rig? Do you still use it, or did it turn out to be infatuation, not love? Yeah, we've been asked questions along that theme before, because as those of you who have the gas know, it's quite easy to acquire stuff and be super fizzy about it and love it. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, I'm not sure about this. I think the last major one for me would have been, like, in terms of I can't live without it, is either the CXM 78 Reverb, CXM 1978 Reverb, which is by Chase Bliss and Maris, or the Hughes and Kettner Rotosphere, probably. Like overdrive pedals, they can just come and go, can't they? And one week I'm using a Jam Tube Dream Mark II, the next week a vintage Tube Screamer. I'm kind of happy to switch between them. But yeah, there's those things that just go on the board and you never really get rid of them. Like I keep coming back to the Free the Tone flight time delay. So that. Dan's, I think, oh yeah, we're not very well sound insulated in here. So last week it was Thunder. This week there's a few A400s going over the military transport plane, which, you know, sound pretty awesome. Hey, G Barge, who came to the Experience Day on Friday, went up in a Spitfire. How cool is that? It was great to see you, G. I don't know if you're back in the US yet or if you're still in the UK, but Spitfire, man. Whoa. Was it V10 Merlin? How cool is that? Anyway, what's been Dan's most recent one? He really loves the DT-OSM Fuzz, Dark Side of the Moon Fuzz by DevTech. Sorry if I've got that wrong. I think it's by DevTech. He's really fallen back in love with his Carl Longbottom custom 71, T16 71. Is that right, Carl? Have I got the name right? But yeah, things come and go. But it's okay, isn't it? That's where the learning is, I think. And it's okay to go through that infatuation, because in that is learning and in that is discovery. And as long as you realise you're never trying to get to a destination, it's always just a journey, then I think it's great to come in and out. And if you buy smart, right, if you buy used and you buy it for a good price, you can sell it again. We were joking at the Experience Day on Friday. Dan got the CE1 out and his old Electric Mistress and the, what was the other thing he bought first? Somebody's screaming at the screen. He bought 3 pedals, CE1 chorus. Oh yeah, Memory Man, Deluxe Memory Man. And I was saying, how much did he pay for them in Coogee in early 2000s? Like a few $100s, whatever. You could sell them for so much more now, even though it's fairly normal electro-harmonic stuff. We were saying, you know, try and sell second-hand drugs. Can't do it. Thanks for the question, Andrew. And hopefully you guys are sharing your things that were love, not infatuation, in the chat. Well, we've got loads of Skinny Puppy, says Kay Cole. Back to our animals band names. Todd Roy says Dinosaur Jr. Winery Dog says Todd Roy. Buffalo Springfield says Johnny C. Praying Mantis says Evan Ward. Nice. Johnny T says the Spitfire was probably a V12. Wow, even better than V10. Todd says, buy smart. What's that? Oh, Rosie's here. Rosie had a little mishap in the week on Tuesday. And here is Rosie now. We'll just show you Rosie. Are you going to come up, Rose, and say hello to the peoples? Hang on, let me get rid of this. Come on then. Come here, Rose. Come up. Come up, please. Okay, so Rosie is now Conehead dog, satellite dish dog. She has a little scar here, a little bit of a gangster shaved eyebrow, and the satellite dish head. She had a little run-in with a Labrador and managed to get a tooth through the top of the head. So all was fair in dog mucking about and war. So we don't feel too bad about it, and we're glad that Rosie is recovering nicely. Rosie loves Dan, by the way. This Dan as well. Normal Dan is not here this week. He's working with animals, as we've said. And so Knitted Dan is in. And Rosie is currently giving work experience Dan a hug around the neck, which is nobody gets that, Dan, just so you know.
Very special.
Only the UPS driver gets that. Todd Roy says, poor thing, it's not a cone of shame, it's an Elizabethan collar, Mick. Yeah, Blackadder. Yeah, she is. Thank you for all your kind wishes for Rosie. She is mending brilliantly well, and she's, for something of a 20% psychopath, she is coping with the cone pretty well. All spaniels are 20% psychopath, just for the record, in case you feel left out. Yeah. PG Nash, thank you for your generosity, PG, and thanks to everyone for your generosity with the super chats. We really appreciate it. He says, cheers to the new tone bar. Tone bar, we like it. He says, last week we finally played the release show of my new record in a packed club. I'm so grateful to be able to play loud and proud in front of people who enjoy ARC. And thank you for helping me find my signature tone. That's really great to hear, PG. That's everything we want to hear. And on the subject of ARC, we've been talking about it a lot. We talked a lot about it in the Experience Day on Friday. For those of you who don't know, ARC, analog, real and communal, as opposed to digital, individual and virtual. And I think we're all starting to feel a little bit like we are appreciating the ARC moments a little more. No negativity, but there is a lot of bullshit going on in the world at the moment. So hanging out with like-mindeds and doing the thing you love and being in that moment and enjoying it rather than being in your head with all the crap is wonderful. So PG, that is amazing, and congratulations. Awesome. Have you sent us a record? I'd quite like to hear it, or at least send us a link. Jason Sears, how are you, Jason? Good to hear from you, buddy. He says, I'm curious to hear Dan's thoughts on tube buffers, given Fryette's release of the mini valvulator. Yeah, we had a question about this week and about this last week. I didn't know what it was. Since done a bit of reading on it. Now, what's cool about the bar is we've got all our production gear in here, which means we can sit in here and play, and we can run cables back to the amp. Now, I think if there's any better test for buffers, it's running cables over a fairly decent distance. So between here and there, I think we could get into this. Everyone, right? Everyone, including me, and I dare say including Dan, is confused about buffers. We know what they are. We know what they do. We know how to use them. And yet, every time one seems to get involved in a different position on the pedal board, something different happens. So I think there's some content there. We'll see if Fryette will send us one. And if they won't, maybe we'll have to pony up and buy one, because it does really sound like a cool thing. So, yeah. I mean, I'm with you, Jason. I want to know, does it make any difference? Raf Freitas. Raf, how are you, buddy? He says, hi CPS, it's been a while. He says, forgive me, I got sidetracked by James Hoffman, but I'm back, caffeinated and ready to rock. What pedal would you gift a friend who's into blues rock, but they don't have any pedals yet? Oh, well, I think that depends on their guitar and amp, and it depends on the players that they really like. But, you know, good old bit of BR. Sorry, Ainsley Lister always jokes because he always gets called BR, which of course is what he is, but it tends to be a narrowing genre rather than a widening one. But so we call it BR. Overdrive, I think, is pretty essential in blues rock, isn't it? That would be the rock part of the blues bit. So if your friend who is into BR has an amp that doesn't have a lot of overdrive in it, then I would get them probably a dual overdrive that's got two sides that do kind of different things, like maybe brown protein, D&M drive, dualist. That's what I'd get, a King Tone dualist. Now, it's not the cheapest pedal in the world, made by Jesse Davey, very nicely indeed, and so they're not super cheap. But I would say a dual overdrive, so one that has one flavour, one that has another. Even better if you can stack them in both directions. And yeah, then you can explore some different overdrive tones. After that, I don't hear a lot of delay in blues rock. It's there for sure, but I'm not sure that would be a first port of call. Maybe some kind of modulation that might be univibe, because we would associate the univibe with all kinds of people, but obviously Hendrix and everyone who came after him, who was into that style of playing. Yeah, or a rotary speaker. Something with a good wobble on it that's beyond chorus. Yeah, that's where I'd go. Let us know what suggestions you guys have. Johnny T, on the subject of the D&M drive, says the D&M drive needs some love. Would it not fit on Friday's show? It would have done. It would have done. But the point of, we wanted to, because the show was called, can you use just one overdrive pedal, or one overdrive pedal is all you need? We wanted to start with single pedals. So to put a dual overdrive on there sort of felt a bit cheating, even though, of course, what a dual overdrive is doing is two overdrives, right? It's just in one box. On the subject of the D&M drive, it is discontinued. So if you can find one somewhere, buy it. It sort of, yeah, it got discontinued. So I think Dan and I will be looking to do something new in the not too distant future. But if you can find one, that's it. There are no more. So buy them up, people. And thank you to everyone who's bought one. We have had a fantastic run with the D&M drive. I think over time, Dan and I gravitated to single things that did the things, because the D&M drive, for those of you who don't know, signature pedal we did with Keeley. One side was me, kind of somewhere clonny, somewhere tube screamery, and somewhere in between those two things. Probably more clonny than tube screamery, to be fair. And Dan's side was a bit more overdrive, bit more rock. And I think both of us kind of liked our own sides, but maybe didn't love the other side in the fullness of time. So we started to gravitate towards individual pedals that do the sorts of things that we personally love, which is no shade on the D&M drive. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Still sounds amazing. Still an awesome pedal. But I think that's what happened over time. So yeah, it is no more. If you can find one, buy it, because that's it. With massive thanks to Keeley for such a long run. It was 10 years. Nuts. Nuts. Joshua Schwartz. Hello, Joshua. He says, it's new pedal week. My Dark Side of the Moon from DevTech has shipped. Thanks for everything, D&M. There we go. We mentioned it earlier. Really nice fuzz. People who come to experience days, we had a great experience day on Friday, are always surprised at how Dan sets his DTOSM, Dark Side of the Moon, DTSOTM. God. Anyway. It has no official Floyd affiliation, by the way. It's just called that. Dan sets it not massively fuzzy, just like slightly more than distortion with that sort of square edge that a fuzz has. People are, he says, here's my fuzz, and what you get is just a fantastic distortion sound. So I think people are quite surprised by how he sets it. Maybe when he's back, he can explain that and show you his settings. But congratulations, Joshua. That's really cool. Richard Pribenow says, the whammy bar. Yes. Ed, Airfire, how are you, buddy? He says, I must say my partner keeps coming to me moaning about things happening on social media. And I keep saying, I think we need less social media. Don't get me started. I'm entering a new level of, I don't want to say zen, but I'm entering a new level of, I only have so many more F-bombs to give about it all. So it is what it is. It's part of our lives and part of our world, and we live with it. And I guess to stay sane, it's up to you to find a relationship with it that works. So you can't change what happens. What you can change is your relationship with it. And I think that's the work we probably all need to do to a lesser or greater extent. In my case, a lot of work needs to be done because it is doing my head in. And that's my choice, isn't it? Because I'm choosing to have a bad relationship with it. What does Eckhart Tolle say? You can treat there's 3 bad ways you can treat the current moment. The last one is as an enemy. The first one is as a means to an end. And the middle one is, I can't remember, something in between the two. But if you're treating the current moment like that, i.e. as a means to an end, you're simply treating this moment as a bridge to something else, or you're treating it as an enemy, then you're choosing a bad time, really. So that's my thoughts on social media. I feel you, Ed. I feel you. Not in that way. Yeah. Nicholas Ecker says in modern America, staying away from social media is key. It's a real... no, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Hello Pork Pie Hat says the Holdsworth boost is good for blues. Funnily enough, we get asked quite a lot, could you do genre-specific shows? Like, could you do pedals for blues, pedals for rock, pedals for whatever? And my response to that is always, not really, because if you look at any one of those genres, you will have found in rock everything from a clean boost to a treble booster to the most evil of distortion and fuzz pedals imaginable used right across that genre. And the same is true of fusion, and the same is true of blues. So it's kind of tough, I think, to narrow it down like that. Probably good for clicks on Das Internets, but as you know, we're trying to get the algorithm to kill us at every possible opportunity. Stephen Turner says, hello, Mick. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you very much for asking. Hope you are too, buddy. He says, since starting rehearsals for my new Dire Straits tribute, good on you, I noticed my playing improved considerably over the last 6 months, playing MK style guitar. Yeah, good for you, man. I mean, practice makes better, doesn't it? And I think the more you do it with other humans in a space that is actually making music, you'll notice your improvement really go on a vertical curve. There's nothing like... Somebody on the Experience Day on Friday said they started playing guitar pretty late and almost immediately joined one of those rock school things, and almost immediately was put in with playing with other human beings. And I was like, man, that is so great. Like, you just start playing guitar and straight off the bat, you start playing with other people. I appreciate it's not something that's available to everybody, but if it is available to you, and this rock school group thing, please, somebody post it in the chat if you know what it is, provides a way to do that. And I said, man, your playing will accelerate so quickly because you're doing it in that environment. So that's really good to hear, Stephen. Nice one. Nice one. I do want to know if you're using a compressor Are you using a compressor for the not for cleans? I'm always kind of interested in that. Yeah. Okay. Super choice. Eric Zenhausen. Thanks for your super chat, Eric. He says, hey D&M, I'm lucky enough to have a Red Wing. Good for you. He says, can you explain the phase toggle a bit more and possible use case? I can hear it makes a difference, but haven't got my head around how to use it. Yeah, good question. This is one for Dan, really. I think what the phase does is it flips the phase of the two LFOs. So in Red Wing, you've got two completely separate LFOs for the flanger or chorus or whatever it is. And whatever you've got the wave set to, I think there's some different wave options. It will invert the phase on the other wave, so the relationship between the two, lines will change. Sorry, I'll just check if this is. Yeah, thanks, BV. I will read that out in a minute. It changes the nature of the sound, so what it can significantly affect this sort of EQ response, and it can go from like thicker and soupier to shimmerier and different types of sounds. And to wit, BV says, if using it to get chorus, set the delay time medium mission, set delay line to short, and offset this, use the offset button, and flip the phase, then you're into dimension C type sounds. So yeah, it affects the phase of the two separate delay lines. So you'll probably find that one sounds thicker and fuller and the other sounds shimmerier and more watery. Can we say more watery? Yeah, that's what it does. That's what it does. I think. Winston Bowman. Winston, how are you? Dan, by the way, if you want to get gone, mate, you don't have to sit there.
Okay, thanks.
Please. I thought Catherine said that to you earlier, but sat there listening to me talk has got to be the worst thing you can possibly do. So by all means, skedaddle and go and get some dinner, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Where we do, yeah, good. That's not this Dan, by the way. It's work experience Dan. Hi D&M, thanks as always for all you do, says Winston Bowman. I need a new speaker for my Hiwatt Custom 50. I was thinking Fane or EV, but I mostly play at home these days, and I was wondering if something lower efficiency could pair well. We were shocked by the Celestian Peacekeeper speaker. Absolutely bowled over with it. So for those of you who don't know, Celestian came out with a speaker that instead of being rated at typical, so efficiency, right? Sometimes it's called efficiency, sometimes it's called sensitivity, and it is a rating given to a speaker measured in decibels at 1 meter at 1 watt. Typical speaker, for example, something like a Celestian Greenback is going to be like 97 dB, I think, something like that. And they can get, you know, typical values for guitar, modern guitar, 12-inch guitar speakers will go from like 95 to 101 at the extreme. And if you know anything about the logarithmic nature of the decibel scale, the difference between 95 dB and 101 is colossal. For every 3 dB increase, double the volume-ish. So if you put something like an EV, which is typically rated around 100 dB, into, say, a Princeton, as Dan has done, a 12-watt Fender Princeton, compared with a 96 dB speaker that was in it before, surprise, surprise, it is audibly twice as loud. And it never ceases to amaze me. That's how it goes. So to your question, if you go the opposite way and you put a lower sensitivity speaker in, will it be quieter? Yes, it will. See you later, Dan. See you later. See you tomorrow, buddy. Thanks for today. And the Peacekeeper, the thing that blew us away about the Celestian Peacekeeper, is rated, I think, at 85 or 86 dB, so way down, was just how quiet it was. We could kind of crank 50 watt Marshall, and it was, you know, you could hear it in the next room, but it was really, really quiet. So I think it's a pretty good idea. I have heard talk that Eminence is coming out with something similar, rated slightly north of there. So yes, absolutely. The thing to do is look for a speaker with an efficiency rating of, I don't know, 96 or less. And 96 is still going to be pretty loud. That might even be what greenbacks are. What's in there at the moment? If it's something in there that's 100 dB, coming down to 95 will make a massive difference. Will it make enough difference to be able to crank it at home? Probably not. But yeah. Let us know, people, if you're high watt players, what speakers you like. Thane has done a new crescendo, is that right? Am I getting that right? Oh, Andrew R, sorry. 3 dB is double the power, 10 dB is double the perceived volume. Thank you, Andrew, for pointing that out. It's volume is such a weird thing, isn't it? It's such a weird thing because there's so much psychoacoustics involved in volume. So much. And the overall volume rating is also massively frequency dependent. So you could be hearing 90 dB. If you were hearing 90 dB with a high-end roll-off at 1K, it wouldn't sound loud at all. It would just, you know. If you were hearing 90 dB with a peak at 2K, that would sound really loud. So it is completely frequency dependent as well. Yeah. Frankie Holt says, sorry I'm late. Greetings from the sultry south. Nice. Was that like Bognor Regis or somewhere? I'm joking, of course. Cbink82 says, I've put a Heritage G12M, which is 96 dB, into an Orange AD15 versus a standard vintage 30, which is 100 dB. So he's gone from 100 dB vintage 30 to a 96 dB G12M, Heritage, whatever that is, greenback, I guess. So that the amp will drive at lower volume. So yeah, Cbink is doing exactly that. Yeah. We know it's Muscle Shoals, Frankie. You used to tell us. Hit recording capital of the world, was it? Alabama, Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Good. Iron Wolf 1776. I haven't seen Mick play his ES345 for a while. Are there issues? No, not at all. It's fantastic. As the people who came to the experience day on Friday will attest. It's a magic guitar. It's a magic guitar. I play the 335 because I think on the shows I've started playing the 335 because I think it's closer to what most modern 335s kind of sound like. When we play guitars on the show, as much as I want to play my vintage Strat and the 345 all the time, we've got to be a bit mindful of playing guitars that people recognise, or at least have a sound that's maybe a bit more typical of the breed. I don't know, is that the right way to say it? It sounds a bit wanky, doesn't it? I don't mean it like that. We also know that people get a bit angry at us for using really expensive vintage guitars because they feel it's elitist. So I know, shouldn't care, but yeah. I'd also just done a gig with the 335 and I really just loved playing it. I took it because it was a boiling hot day. It was a big outdoor stage. There was lots of moving around, and the 345 is kind of valuable and very fragile, and you know, it's a cronky old sod, really, is what it is, whereas the 335 is rock solid. So same reason, although I didn't really find out till afterwards, that I took this I've had some interesting revelations about this guitar. So back in the day, when they first released it, there you go, look at that, foot switchable cameras. Nice, oh yeah, nice. Probably a bit bright, but anyway, look at it, oh nice. Who knew? Boss FS6 to switch the video. All right. All right. I thought I'd put that on silent. Anyway. Oh, thank you very much, BV. BV says that the new speaker from Eminence is called the Muse, and it's 92 dB. So that's going to be somewhere in between the very, very quiet Celestian Peacekeeper and what we might think of as a normal guitar speaker. I'd like to hear that 92. I think that sounds like a really sensible level. Anyway, yeah, the reason I took this, I took it at the time I'd played the guitar for about 20 minutes and thought, oh, sod it, I'll just go out on stage and play it, which I did. And I was really surprised. I don't know why I was surprised, but I was surprised, and it was rock solid and it sounded fantastic. And I've since found out, because when they first came out, I had a couple cross my path and I just wasn't really into it. For whatever reason, I thought it sounded pretty brash. And the one I had was kind of heavy and just didn't immediately love it. This one took out the gig bag. I was like, I really like this. I've since found out, which I didn't know, the body changed to a nitro finish in back along sometime, and the neck apparently has always been a nitro finish. Now, it's not like a true vintage nitro, but nevertheless, and apparently they did lower the output of the pickups somewhat somewhere along the journey. So if those two things are true, I don't know if they work in isolation or if this just happens to be a guitar that I personally find more enjoyable to play, but thanks to Jack Rouge for that lick. Everyone learn this lick, it's just so lovely. And if you play the notes deliberately like Jack plays them, I don't know if this camera's going to be focused on my I have to move, right? There we go. You're playing in B flat. It's lovely. And you can experiment with how you get in and out of it and your pick attack. Anyway, yeah, where were we? 335s, 345s, Silver Skies, Strats, all the good stuff. I think for the first time in 20 years, I've gone, oh, I quite like a new guitar. I like the fact that it works and it's not, the top string isn't falling off the fretboard and it doesn't have all these weird quirks. I mean, ultimately, the vintage stuff just sounds... You can't, it just is, you know, you can't get near it with a new guitar, in my opinion. But that's not necessarily always better, right? It's just, it's its own thing. And I've enjoyed it. I'm enjoying it in a big way. Yes, so 345, Eric, Iron Wolf, sorry. I love it. It's my second favourite guitar after the Strat. And, yeah. Johnny T. Will you be trying the Fender Super and 62 Deluxe? Have Fender done some new custom amps then? Assuming we haven't burned every bridge with Fender possible by even mentioning the lawsuit and me playing a Silver Sky. Maybe. Maybe. If they've done the Brown Super, is that what they've done? With the harmonic trem, that is just like one of the best amps ever made. I mean, a lot of that era of Fender amps are the best amps ever made, to be fair. But, oh my God, Joey Landreth brought one in the first time we did the harmonic tremolo episode. It's like, that's a sound. That's a sound. That's a sound. Yeah, where's the bald guy, says Dripping Glass. He is working with animals. Yeah. Alex241 says, that's the one thing I like about PRS, constantly tweaking their products during their run. Yeah, I can imagine there's people that are probably annoyed with that, but we've all got over it with our iPhones, haven't we? And other tech that gets upgraded every 3 months. Yeah, Todd Roy says nitro makes a difference. I will go to my grave saying it. Yeah, I'm likely to agree with you, Todd. I think there's other factors in play, like the kind of guitars that it gets applied to tend to be higher end anyway. So if you're going to go to the bother of doing a nitro finish, maybe the wood selection's a bit more careful, etc., etc. Regardless of any tonal effect, it feels different. And that's probably the big thing for me. That said, a really beautifully done polyurethane that's really thin feels great too. But yeah, nitro, certainly old school nitro. If you've been playing guitars that have it for forever, it just feels odd not to have it. And that may be a familiarity thing. And of course, it just looks fantastic as it gets older, if you like guitars to look old. And I funnily enough, as I was doing a bit of reading about the guitar, I was doing that sort of reverse justification thing, like where you acquire something, you're like, why do I like this so much? I need to find out why I like it so much. You're not just content with going, I like this. You're like, I need to know why. Ended up in the depths of some PRS forums, like going, holy shit, what this stuff actually exists. And where am I going with that? Nitro. Oh yeah, and there's a lot of people in there that just hate the idea of the guitar aging and scratching. They want it to look perfect for the whole of its life. And I guess I can kind of understand that. I don't want it. That's the last thing I'd want. But I can see why you objectify this thing and you love it and you don't want it to look all beaten and scratched. So yeah, it's all good, isn't it? Because we can have it all now. You just have to choose. Yeah. Yeah, Brian Carpenter said, I tried a USA Silver Sky but hated the 7 1/4 radius. I've become too used to 10 or 12. I'm the opposite. I struggle with guitars. I struggle with Fender type guitars, Fender style guitars that are any rounder. Like 9 1/2, yeah, no biggie, but I miss the 7 1/4 down here. And yet I don't think twice about playing Gibsons, which is 12. It's weird, isn't it? I don't think twice about it on a Gibson. Maybe it's something to do with the angle of the neck. Don't know. Andreas Johansson says, my main issue with the Silver Sky is the headstock. It's awful. I like it. I do like it. Just the way I like the Macmull headstock, which is like the brutalist. They're like, we can't copy this. Let's just cut it off along the bottom. Guitar Gizmo says, can we hear you play that Jack Roush lick on your vintage Strat? Curious to hear the acoustic tones in comparison. Sure. I don't know if it's in tune. Where was I? I was back here, wasn't I? More rattles in this guitar, that's for sure. And I guess here is where you're going to hear, I mean, you're hearing all the acoustic qualities of the guitar, so you're going to hear how the different timbres affect the resonance of the string, which they do, and the hardware and all of that, you know. Anything that affects how the string resonates is going to change how it sounds. But it would be a brave person that would compare this to any modern guitar. I know it's my guitar and I know I'm biased, but it is a monster. And it is sounding particularly good at the moment. There was a point where it went dull. And a few of you helpfully suggested, BV, thank you, that it could be something to do with the output jack, but it's just sounding lovely and present at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you... Well, I'll tell you what, let's A-B it then. Let's put some really serious science into play. Tell me what you think. From where I'm sat, higher highs, more low mid in the Strat, more upper mids and lower presence like 3 to 4K in the Silver Sky. Oh, how much are we loving that? How much are we loving that? Yeah. Interesting. Interesting what you're all saying. Just also be aware that this mic is going through quite a serious preamp. It's got loads of what's it called, maximizer and limiter on it, and it's got some fairly serious EQ and all the rest of it. So anyway, they sound different from me. Daniel Mincher says the PRS sounds less high-end. Yeah, now this has been a real revelation for me with Maple fingerboards, because the assumption is that Maple sounds brighter and spankier and all the rest of it, doesn't it? I've been finding kind of the opposite, where Maple sounds thicker in the upper mids to me, but Rosewood, pound for pound, things being comparable, which they very rarely are, but I've noticed it as a sort of general trend, has the super sparkly airy high. And it seems, in Maples, it seems to drop off there, talking about Strats and Strat style guitars. And Rosewood has this sort of lower mid, which Maple has less of. Should, if it is even possible to compare the two things in isolation, which of course it isn't. So don't get too annoyed about it, people. It's just an observation, having played these guitars for 40 years now. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny. I've been slight tangent before we go to the next super chat. I've been thinking about a formula, right, for what tone is. And I've been thinking about it on the back of our good neighborhood disruptor, Jim Lill, has made a video saying that basically a cost-effective preamp in a standard audio interface sounds no different than a high-end Neve, or a higher-end Neve, I think was the subject of it, basically. And of course, he's absolutely tweaked all of the audio pros into slight meltdown. And I'm glad he's done it for two reasons. One, I now know he's a disruptor by choice. I know that's what he's doing after the Tonewood debate. Number two, I discovered JJ Blair. Is it JJ Blair? Let me just say I've got this name right. And yeah, JJ Blair, producer, musician, engineer, who has made a series of videos kind of disputing Jim Lill's claims, and whether it doesn't matter which side you sort of come down on, if indeed you want to come down on a side at all. JJ Blair is one of my new favouriteest humans ever. Man, his knowledge is frightening and his delivery is amazing, and you can tell the guy's a flipping genius. And look at the records he's mixed and all that, and made. But I didn't know about him before. I knew his name, but I didn't know about him, and so I'm really grateful for that. Anyway, flicking through the comments, which I sometimes do when these very divisive debates come up, it's straight motivated cognition in both camps, right? Some people know. So if you work with this stuff day in, day out, and you've done 20 years of audio production, then you know. You just know. If you've bought a preamp or two and listened to it and sent it back and whatever, you don't know. You know what you heard that day, and that's all good, and that's fine. That's the experience we need to build on as time goes on. And there's a difference between knowing something and believing something. Well, let's do it like this. Not suggest it's an up and down thing. If you know, it's 100% no, 0% belief. If you don't know, it's any percentage of belief. And it seems that people are motivated to believe in different ways, whatever it is you believe in. If you believe wood makes a difference in a guitar, or if it doesn't. And there are certain psychological tricks you can perform that will get the believers believing stuff you tell them. I've also watched some interesting psychological videos on this about the tricks that people use to do that. So I'm thinking, right, what I know about how guitars sound is unique to me. And it doesn't mean that it is applicable to anybody else. I know it, and I know it on a level that language doesn't work at. So I know it, but I can't explain it. Like, I just tried to explain to you some of the things I've discovered about the Silver Sky. As much as I try to use words, it doesn't explain the combination of senses that go way beyond the 5 that you know about. Tell me, I can't explain it. It's beyond language. So you've got what you know. I then figure, so we'll call that K. K probably means something else in logic, but we'll call it K. Then comes your level of motivated cognition. What do you want to believe? I want to believe that maple sounds darker than rosewood. So we go K, what you know, times MC, motivated cognition. And I appreciate MC is also not a good thing to use in algebra, MC squared and all that. But it's core knowledge, what you know internally, times motivated cognition equals perception of sound. So what we've got there are two absolute massive variables. What do we then do? Because those variables are so great, we can argue about it till the cows come home. Do strats sound like this? Do telly sound like that? Do blah, 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 blah. And because our perception is all different, there's no standard. So what do? We give it to a machine. And JJ Blair was explaining this amazing technique, which many of you may know, but I didn't know, called sum and difference. And it involves taking two signals, flipping the phase 180 and seeing if they completely phase cancel. If they completely phase cancel, they are the same. If they don't phase cancel, they're not the same. Now, there's a whole bunch of other caveats, and there's many other tests you can do, stick things on oscilloscopes, look at sine waves, total harmonic distortion, all that stuff. You can measure it all. But the reason you measure it is because you can't perceive it. And the stuff you perceive is beyond the level of being able to explain it, not least because the person next to you might not be perceiving it. My favourite example of that is think of somebody who has no hearing. Ask them what they hear. Well, they're not hearing anything. They might feel the vibration of a sub, but they're not hearing anything. How far do you have to come out of hearing impairment to be able to hear something? And at what point does that become perfect hearing? And even if you've got perfect hearing, how do you know your brain's decoding it? Because then we add in education. I've been recording guitars for 30 years. And I've learnt a little bit about recording guitars in 30 years, but if I go and talk to my friend Paul Stacey, or I recently met Ethan Johns, had some fantastic conversations with him. If I go and talk to Luke Potashnik, these are all people that are around, right, and who you can bump into in the street around here. And I can tell you that all three of those guys can hear things I have never heard, despite having done this for so long. So I guess on a bit of a long tangent, my point is our perception of it is so wide in the first place. To reduce it to what's the difference between that and that is for the birds, isn't it? Next question, how do you choose anything? Well, I think you choose it and then you play it and you learn it. And a confidence comes when you decide to do that instead of getting in the weeds. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do your own A/B tests, right? I'm listening to 2 sets of speakers at the moment, which are so radically different. I didn't need to really do any more listening, but mic pre's, distortion pedals, guitars, amplifiers. Your personal perception is unique. I get a bit sad, and I've done my fair share of this in the past, of feeling like you have to defend that position because someone is telling you something different. We shouldn't feel attacked by it. It's like, no, I don't agree, and that's cool. And we just all choose the stuff we choose and have a happier life. Is that too hard? Is it too hard? Go and check out JJ Blair. He's amazing. Oh, wow. God, that was a tangent. I'm so sorry. That went on and on. How did we even start that? How did we even start that? Chris Turner says, I'm convinced that the tone that Prince had was in his attitude and walk and possibly his hat. Man, if you read that book on heuristics and biases by Oliver Kahneman, is it? Daniel Kahneman? It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. What you just said is totally true. Anyway. David Tompkins says, so do we think the Jim Lil vids are just trolling jokes? I can't make my mind up. I don't think it's a joke. I think there's some element of serious question in what he does, but you'd go about it differently. I think if you were interested in science. I think if someone is saying, this is what it is, and you're wrong, I would always question that. The point of that pedal show, what do? Me and Dan sit in here and we say, we like this, we like it. You might not, but try it. And then try that, and then try that, and make your own mind up. And I think those kind of videos appeal to people who are a bit scared of making their own mind up or putting the work in to try. Or don't trust their own judgment when they do try something. So they'd rather a definitive answer. They'd rather the absolute truth of... They'd rather the finitude of a decision rather than the chaos of no decision and never really knowing. And I think that's how propaganda works. But anyway, let's move on. Let me go on. C. Bink says the same setup can sound different on any given day, at least to my ears. Not sure if it's humidity, voltage, or purely mental, but I'll stand by it. I stand by it as well. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. Yeah, anyway, I hope that wasn't too much of a crazy tangent. I've just been thinking about it a lot. I got really in my head the last few weeks, feeling quite sad about a lot of things, and it's part of a journey out of that. So anyway, that's what that's all about. Let's get back to the good stuff. Binky, how are you? He says, gents, what are your thoughts on dual master single channel amps? Is this a perfect single channel solution allowing you to get a lead boost? trying to think of an amp that does that. The Orange OR30 that we used on Friday has, it's a single channel amplifier, but there are 2 master volumes, one of which has got a little graphic of a foot next to it because it's foot switchable. So everything else remains the same. You just go to a second volume, or you probably go to, the first one is probably an attenuated version of what the second one is, probably. What do I think about that? I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty sensible, doesn't it? Some people do it by putting a boost or a volume pedal in the effects loop. You've got to be careful about your choice of boost and effects and volume pedal, in that they don't get overdriven and that they can handle the various input and output impedances. You probably want low impedance stuff in that position, depending on the loop. But yeah, anybody else got an amp that does that? Dual master volumes in a single amp? Sounds like a pretty good solution. Sounds like a pretty good solution. Daniel Thornton. Hey Daniel, he says, regarding Friday's programme, what about a boost pedal like an EP boost instead of one of the drive pedals? Where would you place the boost? Yeah, we had quite a few comments that get to the similar sort of place that your question's aiming at here, Daniel. And hopefully we didn't say it explicitly, and perhaps we should have done. It doesn't really matter what the pedals are. The theory is the same. And if you bear in mind that your kind of main overdrive is your main overdrive, and then you either want to make it, well, there's a number of things you want. You want to make it louder, or quieter, which is why we introduced the volume pedal. That does the volume thing. And then you want a second overdrive character, or indeed 3 overdrive characters. So you've got pedal A on, off, pedal B on, off, and then you've got A and B together, right? So where you put the boost depends on the job that you want it to do. Normally, with a boost pedal, I would tend to put it after, because I want my main overdrive sound louder, if the front of the amp can take it. But if we're using the volume pedal to take care of the volume issue, I would probably put the boost first, so we then get a more saturated version of our main overdrive. So you could do it either way. Similarly, we had a question about, how would you handle a clon? Exactly the same, if you have it in boosty mode or if you have it in overdrive mode. So do try them each way around, and you might find a combination that you prefer. Yeah, it kind of doesn't matter what the overdrive pedals are. One thing we did sort of conclude towards the end is, as we were getting that pretty, well, not high gain in a metal sense, but certainly high gain for me and Dan, but neither of the overdrive pedals overdrive control, gain control, was past 10 o'clock really, half 10. Because if you start opening those gain pots up, what you just get is squash and fizz, and you lose the sound. Now, that might be what you want, of course, but for what Dan and I want is clarity, articulation, all that all of that tone snob stuff. That's what we want. So we tend to end up running the volumes of the pedals quite high and the gains lower. So yeah, try it both ways. If you're using a volume pedal, I'd probably put it first. And if you want to get the main overdrive more saturated, put it first. If you want a solo boost, put it after. Hope that helps. Michael Schneider. Actually, I'll just have a quick look at the main comments. Simon Williams says, I'm such an idiot. I only became aware of these subjects in the last 10 years. 30 years of blissful ignorance and just playing guitars and using the same stuff I've had for that time. There's beauty in that, Simon. I think there's one thing that we can probably all relate to is you get a new bit of knowledge that you want to try, and then you go off down the road trying it, and you just end up more confused than before. Well, because of my life. And then you end up with 6 overdrive pedals and you're tap dancing all night and you're just totally out of the moment. I didn't know any of this stuff before I met Dan, really, and we started doing it week in, week out. I mean, maybe you know it, but it's not until you just do it and you go, what does happen if you do that? And you just keep doing it, and then you talk about it endlessly, and then eventually that does become fairly useful knowledge. So please don't feel like an idiot, and I've said to Dan on many occasions, I wish I was as ignorant as I was when I was 19, because then I think I'd enjoy playing more. Because now we're in our head, right? We're just in our head with all this stuff. So you got to go there to come back. Maybe this is the return journey. Yep. Yep. Just making sure everything is okay in the chat. Yeah. Yes. James Bicknell. Yes. Looking forward to seeing you as well tomorrow, mate. James has made a purchase from me. Woo! Michael Schneider. Hello, Michael. He says, cheers, M&D. That's not a knife. I recently heard a concert by Jog Blues. Half Hindustani raga players, half Western. I think the guitar was Fender's Esprit, made in Japan in the early 80s and ironically inspired by Gibson. Oh, cool. Okay, Jog Blues. We'll check that out. There's been a few crossovers of that nature down the years, haven't there, I think? Must be kind of interesting. I'm going to display my massive ignorance of raga and other Eastern forms. I want to say there are more notes, is that right? Where we're so used to the tempered scale and a semitone being a semitone, string bends notwithstanding. In as you go east of here anyway, you start getting more microtonal stuff, is that right? Tell me if I'm wrong, please. And the harmonies get different from what we're used to hearing in mainstream Western rock and roll. So it must be a very interesting combination of the two. The Esprit guitar, yeah, so that was, I don't know which came first, the Robin Ford signature model or the Esprit, but they were the same shape. And like a double cut thing with a, like, yeah, imagine if you got a 335, took out the F holes, sharpened off the cutaways, made it a bit smaller. That was the Esprit. And they came in various versions. I think there was even a Squire one, wasn't there, at some point? Maybe not. And lovers of them really love them. So, yeah, check it out. Google it. Fender Esprit. And somebody fill me in on the intelligence about whether the Robin Ford model came first or whether the Esprit was first. Yeah. Yeah. Sunburst LP says, all good, I'm late. Where's Dan? He's working with animals today, so he can't be here. Yeah. Brandon Whiteley. Hey, Brandon. Thanks for your super chat. He says, I just picked up a Princeton with a Jensen P12Q. Still not sure it has enough low end for me. Still convincing myself to keep it anyway. Think it might be a sweet stereo rig with the bass breaker 15. Okay, P12Q, if that's the speaker that I think it is. Yeah. Our Deluxe Reverb 64 hand-wired had the P12Q in it, I want to say. Unless it was a C12Q. Yeah, C12Q. Ceramic or Alnico. Just as a point of pure personal opinion, and I appreciate you may disagree, and that would be fine. I thought that C12Q speaker was a pile of shit. It just couldn't take anything the Deluxe threw at it. It was caving in. It was farting. It was everything I hate about low power speakers. Having grown up playing EVs and Mesa C90s and JBLs. So what it meant was the Deluxe was half the volume that it should be and just was farting out everywhere. Now, you very well may love that sound, and that's good if you do. So if the P12Q is anything like the C12Q, and I don't know that it is, if you want bottom end out of that Princeton, put a beefier speaker in it. I am utterly astounded at the bottom end that comes out of our 65 Princeton Reverb reissue since Dan put the EV in. To be fair, with the standard speaker, whatever that was, which wasn't a P12Q, I don't think. It was, yeah, look, 93.2 dB, it says. Oh no, hang on, that's the C12Q. P12Q. 95 dB, so it's still fairly low. Yeah, putting the EV in the Princeton, not that I would suggest everyone puts an EV in a Princeton, it's a very acquired taste, but the bottom end in it and the fact that it doesn't crap out is astounding. So I would go, personally, before you move it on, at least try a different speaker. Make sure it will fit in there before you put it in, because hang on, I just need to check something. Oh, interesting. So the Princeton does have a 12-inch speaker. Dan's is a 10. Yeah, before you move it on, try a beefier speaker and see what you think. And if you don't like it, then you can always put the original speaker back in and flog it. But would make a sweet stereo rig with the bass break at 15. Yeah, possibly. If you're going to run anything stereo, you need to get the amps sounding as similar as possible. Personally, Dan and I would always go with wet dry. For two reasons. One, if you can't take 2 amps, you just use the wet side and you've got all your effects. Secondly, stereo is a left-right thing, and left-right is a pain in the arse if you're playing on small stages and all that. Wet dry, go on, go on, go on, go on, go on. Compicorda 64 says, kind of thinking out loud, but if loud, clean and headroom is important, why not use 2 heavy tube bass amps as power amps, e.g. Orange AD200 or the aforementioned Ampeg? Yeah, people do that. I think loud and headroom and clean is important to a point. You know, you want your level of headroom, but endless headroom is, I would say, well, some people love it. For me and Dan, endless headroom is not desirable. You want the right amount of headroom for the sound you want. So, and also the frequency response of those things, depending on what speakers they hit, is kind of a different game. But plenty of people have done it. Plenty of people have done it for sure. Yeah. Yeah, just making sure everything is groovy in the main chat. Yeah. Have fun, Brandon. Whatever you decide to do, have fun. But please do try a different speaker. Seth Rowe. Hello, Seth. Seth says, I heard the Wallflowers live last week. Many songs featured a lap steel. Do you guys ever fiddle with the odd non-guitar stringed instrument? Oh, man. You may relate. Everyone out there, you hear a lap steel, or you see a pedal steel, or you see a Ricky 12 string, or you see a mandolin, or something like that, and you go, I could do that. And you get one. And then about a week in, you go, no. Lap steel is the coolest sound. It's just such a cool sound. Distinction, people. Lap steel, usually about that big, sits on your lap. Or you can play them standing up as well, but the idea is you approach the guitar from the top, not from around there. Usually 6 strings. Pedal steel, different thing. On a table, levers and pedals. So lap steel, think David Linley, Ben Harper, and loads of other people. One of the Larkin Poes. Sorry, I don't know their individual names. One of the Larkin Poes. Pedal steel, completely different thing. But lap steel, you'll hear everywhere. You hear it everywhere. And it ends up in all kinds of music, and it's a wonderful thing. now you've said it, I kind of want to get one again, but I just can't play slide guitar of any kind. I've tried, believe me, I've tried. I've even had lessons off Joey, and I think it's the kind of thing you'd have to do 1,000 hours just to even start, if you are as ham-fisted at it as I am. I just can't intonate. Just can't get the note. Because, and I think this is it, if I had a guitar built, right, that put the frets where the middle of the frets are currently, I might be better at it. When I go for a note, right, I'm not aiming for the fret, I'm aiming for the space in between. Here's something that you might not have thought about, or it might seem like the most obvious thing in the world. I'll do it on this guitar because the fret is clearly visible against the rosewood fingerboard. Right, when you fret a note, go to B-cam. When you fret a note, right, I don't know, I've set the focus all the way back here like a twit. When you fret a note, if you fret this note here, which is a C on the G string, right, the note is sounding from the top of this fret. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th fret. How do I not know that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the note is sounding from the top of the 5th fret, right? But you're putting your finger in between the 4th and the 5th fret, right? The note is sounding from here, but you're fretting here. So my problem with slide is, when I go to play a C on the G string, I put the slide here, which is not a C. Have I got a slide? I might have a glass. Right? Look. Okay? You sit on there and don't fall off. The note is above the fret, not in between them. Sorry. I appreciate that is potentially the most obvious thing anyone has ever said in any guitar video. But I cannot get my head to go over the fret. Cannot get my brain to put my hand over the fret, not over the space in between the frets. Does that make sense? I know, mad, huh? Hopefully there's loads of advice coming in on how to play slide guitar better. Why not just make the 10th fret one higher, says David Tompkins. Megan, Evan Ward, thank you. Megan from Larkin Poe. My apologies for not knowing her name. Megan plays the lap steel, Rebecca plays the Strat, says BV. Thank you. Megan and Rebecca. Would be really great to get those guys on the show. Joe Peasy for Sheezy says, hey Mick, what's your system for dealing with monitor engineers? Do you give them specific instruction or DBs? Do you just hope for the best? Most of mine do each person, then the band plays. Yeah, I don't do enough gigs with monitor engineers for that to be a thing. If I do gigs with a sound person, it's usually a front of house sound person who says, can you hear that? And you say, yes. And then you say, I want no guitar, no bass, no drums. All I want is vocals. And I want my vocal twice as loud as everybody else's. And that usually works. And then, you know, halfway through the set, you realise you can't hear anything at all. I never use in-ears. Don't use them. Only ever wedges. But like, I don't do that many big gigs where that level of monitoring is required. So, yeah. Yeah. Nice, lots of suggestions coming in on lap steel players. Thank you about that. Phil Bradley says, you need a fretless guitar. Oh, God. Yeah, I do like that thing. Like if I do ever play slide for a couple of hours and you start to sound a bit better, that thing where you fret behind the slide, I love that. So frets being required in that sense. But anyway, Pedal Train Nano says the most important thing is to not look down. That is great advice. That's really great advice. Because as Guthrie Govan once famously said, and I'm sure he stole the quote from somebody, you haven't gone wrong till you stop. When you sound a bit pissed, when you like, actually, talking of pissed, water, not vodka. Oh, BV's going to ask Rebecca. Thank you. Please do. Bumblefoot plays fretless guitar. Sounds good too, says Evan Ward. Yeah, man. I interviewed him once. Did a series for Total Guitar. He's one of the craziest people I've ever met outside of Greg Koch. In a good way, crazy. Chris Liddle. Hey, Chris. Chris says, I don't get to catch VCQ live very often at the moment, so this is a rare treat. Please take one from the chat. We will do, Chris, and thank you for joining me and Voodoo Dan this evening. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man. See if we can get copy strike for this. Copyright strike. Oh, we got to play it in E flat, haven't we? Standing next to a knitted Voodoo Dan. So I've only got one string tuned down. Chop 'em down with the edge of my hand. That was your Voodoo Steinhardt slight return. One from the chat then. Let's see. Great band name, says Frankie Holt. Voodoo Dan. Ozempic Dan. Right, we'll take the question from Soul is the Goal 96. What in God's name is that pig thing behind Voodoo Dan? Okay, that pig thing is actually Spider Pig. And if you look on it, Spider Pig is signed and it says, hello Rose, it's Spider Pig. This is a fluffy toy, I know, but it's not yours. If you look on Spider Pig's belly, it says, to Mick and Dan, love Achenbach. Achenbach is John Achenbach, who was creative lead, head something at The Simpsons, and Beavis and Butthead. And Dan and I went to see him one Sunday of NAMM. John also does custom artwork for Jam Pedals. John Achenbach, right? And we were walking around the halls of NAMM, and we bumped into John. And he said, do you want to come to the Simpsons studio tomorrow? We were like, yes. So we sacked off NAMM, went to Fox Studios up in Burbank, and had a tour of the Simpsons studios on a Sunday. It was nuts. There was nobody there, but that is where it happens. And John, bless him, sat and drew, showed us how he draws the characters. He did Simpsons Me and Dan, just in pencil, you know, just sketches, before Fox tries to sue us or whatever. Just in sketches as a memento. And it was a really amazing day. So John, I don't know if you ever watched this, but big love to you, mate, and I hope you're doing great. So that's what that is, Spider Pig, which is in the Simpsons movie. Spider Pig does whatever a Spider Pig does. Sung by Homer. That's a cool story, isn't it? I love telling that story. Soul is the Girl says, that's crazy. It was crazy. It was totally surreal. Totally surreal. Chris Turner says, Greg Koch, Bumblefoot and Angine walk into a bar with instruments. What could happen? A load of nonsense is what could happen. They were They were bloody amazing on Jules Holland. I said this last week, but there's right. Please understand what I'm about to say. I am in no way casting any aspersions about Angine de Poitrin's ability. Nevertheless, when you see a video that's been made, I've got questions. I've got so many questions. To see them do it on Jules Holland live answered all of those questions. I wasn't doubting it. I wasn't cynical. I just was like, I was so amazed at their ability. I was struggling to understand how much of it was whatever it was. So to see them do it live on Jules Holland, it's like, oh, wow. It really is what it seems. Unbelievable. I have such sights to show you, perhaps. It cuts off after show. So I have such sights to show. Says, I'm running a wet dry setup with a Top Hat Ambassador. Oh, nice. Don't hear much about Top Hat amps. And a Dr. Z Maz 38. Thinking about adding a third amp for wet dry wet. Any suggestions on something a bit different but still fitting in? It's so hard, right? So we had this almost this exact question, but with different amps at Friday's Experience Day. You're currently running wet dry with 2 amps, right? 2 slightly different amps. I don't know, hang on. Tell me what's in the Top Hat Ambassador. Ambassador, you're really amping us up tonight. Okay, it's either 6V6 or 6L6, whereas the Maz 38 is EL84s, is it? Anyway, the amps are different, that's the point. And one great thing about wet dry is the amps can be different, because what they're doing is they're combining to make a whole. In the same way that you have, and it's not as extreme as this, in a loudspeaker you have a bass driver and a tweeter. And they are combining to make a whole. You don't want to listen to either of those things on its own. I appreciate this is an extreme example, but the point will become clear. They are doing a joined up job so that the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts. And you can do different things with the amps, right? They can be set to slightly different gain, they can be set to slightly different EQs, you can send different pedals to them and all that. Once you get to stereo, the stereo things kind of have to be the same, or at least they've got to be very similar. Because what you're doing with wet dry is you've got wet dry, and what you're doing with wet dry wet is you're duplicating this and putting it there in order to get proper stereo. Because remember, proper stereo wants to be the same thing both sides but just panned. So in an ideal world you would get another Maz 38 or Top Hat Ambassador and use those as your wet and the other one as the dry in the middle. Now the other option is to get something very similar to be the wet amp. So whichever amp you're going to use wet, try and find something similar. And by similar, what does that mean? It means similar sort of gain and headroom, similar sort of EQ response. I mean, ultimately, you might say it doesn't matter. I want it all to be different. I want it all to be, whatever. But you got 2 really lovely hand-wired, pretty much point to point, I think, aren't they? Boutique amps there. So yeah, that's tough. That's tough. That's tough. Maybe a smaller, maybe the other kind of Ambassador. If you've got the 6V6 one, get the 6L6 one. If you've got the 6L6, get the 6V6. And then you've got 2, and you could set them up kind of similar to sound. But if you just want to use one, you've got the choice of either. Same story for the Maz 38, the Dr. Z. Maybe get a smaller Maz, like an 18. And then you could set them up to sound similar in the wet dry wet rig, but then you've got the option of using it on its own. That's what I would suggest. Is that crazy? I don't know. I don't know. Frankie Holt says that dude is a loop Jedi master. I'm assuming you're referring to Angine. Yes, he really is. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal feat of everything, of musicality, of technicality, of facility, of using equipment. It's a real something to aspire to, I would say. Yeah. Good. All right. All right. I hope that helps. I have such sights. I hope that helps. Brian Carpenter, how are you, Brian? Nice to hear from you, buddy. He says, hey, D&M. When did you realise that you were happier playing fewer high-end guitars than having many affordable ones? I feel I'm nearing that point. It's such an interesting question, because our experiences are very different, right? Like everyone, when you're young, you can't afford, well, not like everyone. Like I would say most, I hate this phrase, most people. Who the hell is most people? In mine and Dan's case, which many of you may relate to, when we were young, we couldn't afford loads of guitars. We just had one guitar, or maybe one and an alternative guitar. And we couldn't afford it for a number of reasons. One, guitars are expensive. Two, there just wasn't the choice that there was now. So the idea of buying a pretty decent mid-price guitar in 1990 or 1985 was kind of tough, right? You had Squiers, which were quite good at that time. You had endless number of copy guitars, which generally weren't very good. And you had USA Gibsons and Fenders, which were better. And interestingly, PRS was starting to come onto the market at that time. But outside of that, yeah, there was boutique guitars for sure. But the idea of buying a boutique guitar when you're 15 is, well, to both me and Dan, was like buying a Ferrari now. It's just completely unthinkable. So that changes as the time goes on. And more guitars become available at lower price points. A couple of significant things then happen for me and Dan. One, I joined Guitarist magazine and I've got access to everything. So I get to see everything because it's coming through the magazine every month. And not only that, you're out with artists all the time, so you get to play stuff. And that was like a slap in the face to actually realise what a great guitar was, or at least the kind of things that would appeal to you in guitars that you never had the chance to do before, because as a 15 or a 16-year-old, 17, 18, whatever, going into a posh guitar shop and asking them to play 5 custom shop Gibsons, you'd have been told to just leave. I remember going into one of the shops on Denmark Street, 900 quid in my pocket in cash when I was 16, to buy a Mark III Boogie. And I said, can I try that Mark III Boogie? And the guy said, no. He said, no. He might have said some other stuff like, not really now, mate, we're too busy, or something like that. But I was thoroughly discouraged from doing it. So I went down to Chandler's and anyway, whatever. So for me, it was being on Guitarist magazine and getting access to really high-end guitars and just seeing what the difference was. And I don't necessarily think that that would appeal to everybody. I think we were speaking to some people at the Experience Day on Friday where at least 2 of the guys who came said, you know, I've got my old guitar that I got first and it's a Mexican Telly or whatever it was, and I just play that all the time. Great, because I love it. And that's my guitar and that's what I feel at home playing. I think that's worth everything. But I think, you know, my dad was kind enough to get me a proper Strat when I was 14. Hello, Dad, if you're watching. And that was like, I mean, I can't even, you know, right? Because you know when you got your first good guitar, you can't put into words what that meant to you and how important it was. And good guitar as it was, then as I started playing better ones and vintage ones and that, I realised, you know, there was life beyond that guitar, with no disrespect, Dad. That's what growing is, right? But that guitar, I did everything that was important to being where I am now on that guitar. That guitar enabled being here. And still remains the most important guitar I've ever owned. So, sorry for the long tangent, but that's when it was going on to Guitarist magazine and seeing everything. And then I think, then you go through it, don't you? You just buy stuff. And when all that raft of really great mid-range guitars comes out, and something really cool, and you pick it up secondhand for 500 or 600 or something, which I appreciate, is still a lot of money to a lot of people. And you're like, oh, I'll just get that. But then you find you don't play it, and you sell it, and you gravitate to this other thing. And then I think it was getting into vintage guitars that was like, okay, yeah, the herd needs to be thinned. So that was it. That was it for me. I don't think Dan's ever had a lot of guitars. I think, you know, when he was younger, he had his 64 Strat that got stolen. He had his Gem. He then stumbled into the telly by accident. And he's kind of been playing tellies ever since. And then what happens, you have a young family, or firstly emigrated, has a young family, money's tight, starting a business, money's tight. So Dan, I don't think Dan's ever had a lot of guitars. And he's so wedded to red that, or he's absolutely wedded to red up until very recently, when he started to go, actually, I just want to play something different for a minute. So it's quite good fun watching him branch out into other things. But yeah, I would say Dan has never been attracted by that. Oh, that looks cool for 600 quid, that mid-price thing. He's never really gone there. Not sure why. Maybe he could elaborate on that next week. Anyway, thanks for the question, Brian, and be interesting to know what's prompted your journey there. I think ultimately, one day the penny drops that you can't play all the guitars all the time. And for me, it's those sort of crunch moments when I go to a gig and I'm like, what guitar am I going to take? And I take a Strat usually and a Gibson, or, you know, a 3 single coil guitar and a humbucker guitar is what I would always take. And then if you're doing quite a few gigs, I then don't want the distraction of loads of different guitars, because I want to feel comfortable and I want to feel at home, and I want it to be second nature. And Gibson's just about becoming second nature now. I'm really comfortable doing a whole gig on a Gibson where I wouldn't have been 5 years ago. And a Strat, I can operate a Strat without any conscious thought whatsoever. So if there's one guitar, that's the one I'll take. Daniel Mincher. How are you, Daniel? He says, hope everyone at TPS is well. Please take one from the chat. Leg ends. We'll do that, Daniel. Thank you. Soul is the goal. This is a great question, but we had one from you earlier. If you and Dan had to share a guitar, what would the guitar be you'd both be comfortable with? It would be a telly. I've said many times, if it wasn't for Dan, I would probably play tellies. I love tellies. But anyway, I love Strats more, but I really, really love tellies. And I think had we not done this, I probably would have gravitated to tellies by now. I think it might be a 335. I've been trying to get Dan interested in 335s. Dan wants to get interested in 335s because I just think it would be a great guitar for him for so many reasons. So it would probably be that. Because aside from that, it is the perfect guitar. Apart from a Telecaster, it is the perfect guitar. Fight me. Fight me. Anyway. Oh, Brian Carpenter says, the reason I asked the question is I had a Fender Custom Stop Strat, custom built as a gift from my late father. It's now the only guitar I want to play. I've owned it for a year now. Nothing else compares. Well, then what better reason than that? So you've got skin in the game. You've got emotional skin in the game, as it were, with the guitar, and you love playing it. That's probably what we're all striving for, isn't it, at the end of the day? What a lovely thing for your dad to have done. So, Chris Turner says, do you not mean an Ibanez Gem? We both have... I think, yeah, it's hard to explain the love we have for the Gem, isn't it? I think we... Oh, anyway. Oh. Come on then, let's have a question. Let's have a question. Come on, you're here somewhere. Yeah, no questions. Come on. Someone must have a question. No, maybe we'll come back to it in a minute then. And Seventh World says, happy to be here live, Mick. Please take one from the chat from Seventh World. Okay, we'll do a couple at the end, and I'm sorry there aren't there at the moment. So get in with your questions, please. Chris Allen says, I've fallen into a trap of accumulating multiple low mid-gain overdrives. Is it a trap? Which I only seem to like set from low to mid-gain. Any suggestions for a distortion that would sit between these and fuzz? Yeah, jam rattler or a rat. I always think the rat is the distortion that overdrive players can really love. At the aforementioned outdoor big gig where I took the Silver Sky and my 335, I used a single amp, 2-rock. It was a 40-minute set, and big stage, quick on and off times, no sound check. So the idea of taking 2 rigs and wet dry and all that, not going to happen. I took a Jam Rattler Mark II for my higher gain and lower volume rhythm tone. Vintage Tube Screamer, of course. For my Tube Screamer sound, and a fuzz, the Cunningham Mark 1.6 fuzz, and the Rattler was great. I actually leaned on it a lot, so I would say something rat flavored. And as you know, Dan and I love jam pedals. Everything they make is awesome. They are awesome humans, and they're really individual, and they look fantastic, and they work great. So I would suggest the Jam Rattler. What else then to get the jam bias out of the way? There's a lot of brilliant distortions, man. If you can play loud and you can crank the pedal, like an MXR Distortion Plus or a Boss OD250, DOD OD250, for me, though, they're also distortion pedals that can get splatty, square wavy right at the top of their thing, but lower down, kind of bridge that gap between overdrive distortion. Very nice. So I'm going to say MXR Distortion Plus, Boss DOD OD250 preamp. It's called a preamp, it's an overdrive pedal. Or Jam Rattler, or a Rat. Anyone else got any suggestions? Please have them. Chris Egg. How amazing are eggs, right? How amazing are eggs? Think of all the things you can do with an egg. I just can't get my head around it. I had chickens once. Chicken has a multi-purpose thing on the back called a vent. Everything comes out of that, including the damn egg. What? Chris Egg says, hi all. I'll have my TPS strap on stage with me at Shoreline Summerfest in New Haven, Connecticut this weekend. If it wasn't for y'all, I'd still be Googling, do I need a preamp? Thanks for everything. Thank you, Chris. And enjoy that, man. You know, I don't know if you do this every day or if there's something that's newer to you. When you get out there, and if this is, I don't mean to be condescending, for anyone who's doing a gig who hasn't done loads of gigs, the second you count off into that first song, forget everything about thinking about tone, about pedals, about what guitar you're playing. Just forget all that. Let your instinct take over. Let the work you've put into doing the set take over, and enjoy that gig, man. Get your head up, look at the band, look at the crowd, be in that moment. It is the best, well, it's one of the best things ever. It just is. And if you can have the presence of mind, the other thing I would suggest, and I appreciate you haven't asked for any advice. You might know this and you might do it all the time. So this is also for anyone else. The other bit of advice I would give you is, before you go on, find somewhere quiet, right? Just for 2 or 3 minutes and breathe. Because the chances are what you'll have been doing for the last 2 hours is zipping from here to there, carrying gear across a field, worrying about this, worrying about that, talking to people. Your breath will be really short. It'll be right up here. And you'll get on stage and there'll be this, you'll be so tense you don't know what you're doing. Unless, as I say, you may be a veteran of doing this and you might know all this. But for everybody else, take the time to take a breath. Find somewhere quiet, breathe deeply, center yourself, and just don't feel daft about doing it. If you feel that confident, get the other members of the band and all do it together. I promise it will fundamentally improve your experience of what happens next. If you're breathing fully and deeply, you've centered yourself, you're Fonzie, everything is cool. Rather than, 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll carry that stress into about the 4th song. You didn't ask for advice. I gave it anyway. Enjoy, Chris, and thank you for buying a strap. They're lovely straps. Last thing this week, I think I will just double check, but I think last thing this week, no, I'm gonna double check right now. It is last thing this week is Cassius Ray. Cassius Ray, how are you? Says, why do some people say low output pickups don't work with high gain? Is it not just all gain staging? Yeah. Number one, DC resistance isn't everything. You can find some pickups that read low DC that really give things a kick. And it's an aesthetic, isn't it? Like if you, and I don't mean to stereotype, but the kind of, what used to be the EMG crowd, 81s and 85s or whatever they were, into triple rectifiers or Mark II Cs or whatever the high gain amp of the day was, you know, that was the sound, great sound. Then we moved on to high DC ceramics, so various bare knuckle things. Actually, I think bare knuckle stands alone in this because I've never been a fan of very high DC ceramic pickups. All the ones I've tried are like, I don't know what to do with this. Tim at bare knuckle and bare knuckle in general, I think in part to do with working Revere, but also it's just Tim's sort of natural ear and playing ability. Put those quite hot pickups in a really super musical place, and I think he does a great job of it. So, and then I guess if you're into that and that's what you're into, and then you play something with weak pickups, just the same as I don't know what to do with a 16K. We had Devin Townsend's guitar in here. And I don't know what was in it, but it's like, plugged it in. It's like, there was nothing I could do on my pedal board in any of my signal chain to stop it clipping. It was clipping from the second it came out of the guitar. I had no idea what to do with it. Turn that on its head. If you know exactly what to do with that kind of thing, someone hands you a Strat with, you know, late fives, K pickups or whatever. They're like, what the hell do you do with this? So I get it. I fully understand. To say they can't handle high gain, well, that's just bollocks, isn't it? Because look at Yngwie, look at Richie Blackmore, look at Van Halen once he'd put the humbucker in there. But as a point of pure personal opinion, again, please, ever since all these didactic videos came out on the internet with people telling you what's right, I kind of want to point out at every stage, you know, everything me and Dan say is an opinion, right? It's just a personal opinion from one spot. And we would always say, please try different things. Please experiment. Please don't take our word for granted, you know. Try this stuff for yourself. But from a point of pure personal opinion, I think low output pickups, vintage pickups with high gain sounds fantastic. fantastic. I think you hear more of the guitar, personally. I think you hear more guitar, less pickup. Contentious, maybe. So Cassius, yeah, I get it. If you're used to doing one thing and then suddenly somebody presents you with another, whichever way round that is, I get how hard that is. I couldn't play Devin's guitar. I just couldn't play it. It was like, yeah, nothing here makes any sense. So maybe that's why, that in reverse. That in reverse. Okay, everyone, thank you for your super chats. I've blathered on for much longer than I thought I was going to tonight. I hope it's all good. The Cutler Custom is swathed in blue, as you can see, which looks nice. And my erstwhile companion Daniel has done a great job, I think, of being here and full participation. So we said we were going to take a couple at the end. Let's take this one from Eric C. Bone. Eric C. Bone. Have I just said something naughty there? No. Eric C. Bone says, how would you arrange a fuzz, a clon and a tube screamer in the signal chain? That's very straightforward for me, Eric. I would do fuzz, tube screamer, clon. And the reason I would do that is because I like both of those things after the fuzz. Fuzz has to come first, right? It just does. Depending on what fuzz it is. But from fuzz, I'm going to read fuzz face, tone bender, muff. I want it first. And oh, Mick, when are the straps getting restocked? Says BV, and apparently it's come from the chat. I think we've got some on order. I want to say, and I don't know if this is revealing too much. I don't know if... No, I'm not going to say it. We may not have straps forever. So there are some on order. Buy them when they come in and we'll see what happens after that. Sorry, that's a bit cryptic, but I've got to be careful. Maybe I have to be careful what I say. Eric Seabone says, how would you arrange a fuzz, a clon and tube screamer? Yeah, fuzz first, tube screamer second, clon last. And the reason for that is I always want the clon last because it's the highest headroom of any of those pedals. And you can use it as an overdrive or you can use it as a boost. It also has it's non-true bypass. It has a buffer. And I don't want that buffer hitting, I definitely don't want it hitting the fuzz because it'll just won't work. Volume control will go all screwy on the guitar. The tube screamer may also be buffered if it's not a true bypass tube screamer. Going into the clon, I think that's less of a problem, but you don't want it going into the fuzz. So I always want to be able to boost whatever's come before it with the clon. And one of my favourite sounds in the world ever is fuzz face and then clon. And one of my nearest other favourite sounds in the world, if depending on the tube screamer, is fuzz face, then tube screamer. So that's how I would do it. And if you want to disagree, please do. Please do. J.R. Channing. Let's take this then for the last... Oh, Bart Vandal is donk says, I could really use a 16 ohm Celestian Peacekeeper, but it doesn't seem to exist. Can you tell me more? That's a question for Celestian, but I'm afraid I don't know. I thought they did come in 16 and 8 ohm versions, but I mean, I'm assuming it's still in production. It was a hard sell. Here's a speaker and it's quieter than your other speakers. Does not compute. So the last question we'll take is from J.R. Channing, and he says, Mick, if money was no object, what guitar would you buy? Oh my God. Please put your suggestions in, people, for the guitar that you would buy. That's a really hard question. Before I had the old Strat, I would have said probably an old, the old Strat. I would have said an old Strat because it's my dream guitar. But I've managed to acquire one in the end. And there are examples of Strats that are considerably more expensive than this, much more expensive than this, because they haven't been refinished and all the rest of it. But I would like more vintage Strats, but I've got one and it is fantastic. So it wouldn't be a vintage Strat. I've got one. There it is. Look at that. Lovely. In fact, I've got two. I've got a 70 as well, which some people don't really consider as vintage Strats, but anyway. So I think the next thing I would say is a Burst. 59 Les Paul Standard. Or a 58 or a 60, but 59 just for the bragging rights of it. If you could find a good one that hasn't already been bought. But I think it would be the right 59 335. If money was no object, the guitar I would buy would be the right 59 335. Like the one Bukovac had. Maybe. Tell us what yours are, people. You all right, Rosie? Rosie's in the Rosie chair. Asleep. And now waking up. You all right? The gentle shaking sound of the cone of protection. Do you need to go out? Yeah, we'll do that in a sec then. What we'll do is we'll say goodbye to the people. We'll say thanks for joining us. Sorry it was just me. She's Rosie, you can't, she's trying to scratch her chin through the cone. Look, I'll give you a little scratch. There you go. Oh, yeah. Is that right? Is that got the spot? Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll go gnomes in a minute. Sorry, it's just me. As I say, Dan's working with animals. Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely suggestions coming in. A Gus G1, says David Tompkins. Yeah, I was thinking Teufel Birdfish, actually, for a minute there. Black Explorer. Gabe Bergman. How are you, Gabe? Good to hear from you. He says, sell everything, Mick. Yeah, no. Yeah. Yeah. Lamar Brewster, just as a final comment, says, Mick, I recently rewatched your series of tone hunting and changing parts on Blue. Really enjoyed your quest and the detail you went into in that series. It really inspired me. Thank you for that, Lamar. Yeah, you got to go there to come back, haven't you? It was really good doing it. I did enjoy doing all that stuff. Maybe there'll be more. Maybe there'll be more explorations in the future. Actually, I am going to change the hardware on the 335. I'll make a video on that. I'm going to put St. Helens hardware on my 335 because I think it could be a bit better. Anyway, I'll play you out. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us on VCQ. Friday's video is going to be, I think, Adam Miller, who's talking about travelling the world with an acoustic guitar and also electric guitar. And if it's not that, it will be a video on budget boosts and bougie boosts, depending on what I get edited first. So I shall play you out. Oh, I've tuned the bottom string down to E flat in order to do a relatively decent version of Voodoo Child earlier. Oh. See you Friday.